nobody has a magic crystal ball at the beginning of the year to say where will the company be in 6 to 9 months.
You meet a lot of CFOs and FP&A leaders across industries. What are the new trends you're picking? So what is happening now? What are the new trends they are discussing more?
But now, as technologies are becoming, as we mentioned, more accessible, easier to implement. This is changing quickly, and also the expectation is changing quickly, by the way, from senior leadership. So finance teams need to make sure not to miss the boat there. Finance teams need to have access to more than just their accounting system. And at some companies, if they have using a different system for each that are not connected, that are difficult to use. So for example, if they have one CRM system, then they have another HR system, then they have another accounting system, and they all don't talk to each other, they're all different, then that can make it very challenging.
Hello everyone, welcome to yet another episode of Expert Talks from CFO Exchange by Zoho. I'm Satish, your host for today. Today we are going to deep dive into the spend management and its impact in FP&A. Who better to talk this topic rather than our guest today? He is an FP&A expert and had over a decade of experience in working with multinationals like Unilever, Procter & Gamble, and so on. And now he is a director for Wharton School's FP&A certificate program, and over the last 3 years, he has helped thousands of finance professionals in actually upping their FP&A game by his workshops and the seminars. So without further ado, let me welcome Mr. Christain Wattig, founder and lead instructor at Inside FP&A. Hi Christain, welcome to the show.
Hi.
It's glad to have you here.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Christain. Let's start with the basic, right? As I discussed in my introduction. So what is the role of FP&A experts in spend management? Or as if I can put it the other way, what is the role of spend management in financial planning and analysis?
Yeah, so generally speaking, the role of FP&A is to help leaders across the company make better decisions. And when it comes to spend management specifically, there are 3 ways that FP&A professionals add value. One is through variance analysis, it's through identifying risks and opportunities, and it's by maintaining budget discipline. So let me touch on each. When it comes to variance analysis, we compare how spend are coming in to expectations. What that means is that we take the actuals and we compare it to the forecast, the budget, and the prior year. We do these 3 comparisons actually for different reasons. When we compare to the budget, then we take a look at, okay, what has the company committed to investors and stakeholders at the beginning of the year? And how are we spending? How does our spending relate to that? And what's the story of why we're deviating, right? Because most likely we will be deviating. And then we also compare actual spending to forecast. That's so we can understand what was surprising, right? Because the forecast should include everything we know about spending. And then the third comparison is to actuals of the prior year. I would actually argue that that's the least important one of the 3 for helping leaders make better decisions. But companies do it primarily because of the external perspective. Because when an investor looks at a company, they don't have your forecast, they don't have your budget, they only have the actuals of the prior year.
True.
Exactly. So you need to tell the story in a way that the investor would to be able to respond to that. So that's variance analysis. But then where FP&A really adds value is through identifying risks and opportunities in spend management. And the idea here is, the way I teach this is through the what, why, so what framework of variance analysis. So to give an example, let's say professional fees are unfavorable to the forecast by 25,000. That's the what. The why would be, well, it's because our audit fees were higher than expected. The thing is, a lot of finance teams stop here. They don't go further. They say, we tick the box, we did the variance analysis. And so but then they're leaving a lot of value on the table because they haven't yet covered the so what.
What? Yeah.
The so what would be, in this case, well, it's not actually that the business became more complex, that there are more billable hours. When we drilled deeper into it, we found out that the auditor raised their prices. And so actually we recommend to do a tender. We recommend to see if we want to look at a different auditor. So now this becomes useful. Now this becomes actionable, and we can actually make a recommendation to the leadership team what to do. Similar, to give a different example, in the travel space, if your travel expenses go up, often the immediate thought is, well, probably our executives just travel more.
Yeah, and cut the travel there itself. Yeah.
Right, and cut the travel itself.
Yeah.
But when they look deeper into the numbers to really get beyond the why to the so what, they might realize that our hotel partners have increased their rates. Right? And so they're charging more per stay. It's not that we should travel less. It's that we're not smart enough with choosing the venues we're staying at, or maybe we haven't negotiated well enough. Yeah. And that's how you can really get behind that. And then the third point is managing budget discipline.
Yeah.
And so the thing is, finance doesn't spend the money. The different departments do that. But finance has the responsibility to make sure that when we're spending more or less than the budget, we understand why, we analyze that, maybe we even run a financial model to see if it makes financial sense to spend more.
Yeah.
And what's important to emphasize here is that it's not that we need to hold people accountable to a strict budget that never moves, right? Because nobody has a magic crystal ball at the beginning of the year to say where will the company be in 6 to 9 months.
True, true.
So finance needs to be flexible to adjust budgets, but where budget discipline comes in is explaining that, making it transparent, and doing a database analysis.
Yeah, and more important, the visibility of budget. Most of the companies who I meet, actually, the executives say they don't have visibility of budget. Christian, let's unpack that a bit, what we discussed in the previous question. So what do finance teams need to know to get better at driving decisions through variance analysis? So what is that one mantra they need to follow?
Right. So as I mentioned, the what and the why and the so what framework gets you there, but the tricky part is getting to the so what. And so the key here is to get to a true root cause. What I mean by that is you need to find the underlying drivers, and sometimes you need to ask why questions to get to a point where you can make a concrete recommendation. So that means drilling deeper into the data, going to other systems or other data sources than just your ERP system. And it might involve also talking to the budget owners, asking them questions about why they think there was a variance, and following up there. And the question I always get when I teach this is, how do you know you've done enough digging, right? How do you know you asked enough why questions?
Okay.
And the rule of thumb that I give to people is, well, see what insight you get, and then see if that points to 1 or 2 or maybe 3 possible things that a company can do. If there are 1,000 things that a company could do, you haven't digged deep enough, and you need to go deeper.
Yeah, and also how many whys, right? Should we stop with this number of whys, or how many whys? That is also a kind of a important thing. Where do we stop with the whys? Right?
Yeah. 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 whys often isn't enough. Right?
Okay.
And so to give you an example, let's say we try to understand why revenue was different than expected. You might say, well, revenue was different than expected because our marketing expenses didn't deliver as much sales as they used to. That's not enough, right? Because there could be a million reasons why marketing expenses aren't delivering enough. So then you go a level deeper, and you might find that, well, YouTube ads are performing better than LinkedIn ads this period. And so now you're at a point where you can actually make a concrete recommendation. You can say, maybe you should shift funding from YouTube ads to LinkedIn ads. Then you digged enough. So the question is how can you systematically get there? How can you help people to always get there? When you're the CFO, when you're the VP of the team, you want to give people tools to help them get to the true root cause. And I really like the business driver tree analysis framework for that.
Okay.
So a business driver is essentially a reason for why expenses are different, why sales are different than expected, but they are interconnected. And so how a business driver tree works, it's a chart where you have the top metric at the top, and then it breaks down into how does that impact the total. So let's take as an example a restaurant, because a restaurant business is something that everyone is familiar with, and you're trying to understand why are the costs changing. And so at the top of the business driver tree, you would put costs, and then the next layer, the next why question is, well, why did cost increase? It could be food cost or it could be staffing cost. So then it branches out.
Yeah.
But that's not a root cause, because if your staffing costs go up, there are still many different drivers that could explain that. And so then you look at, well, why did staff costs increase? And then this tree branches out into different boxes where you say, well, staff costs could increase because there is more overtime, or maybe because there's more turnover and we have to hire more people and that costs money and training costs money, or because the scheduling isn't done well. And then you might look even further and say, well, why is the scheduling inefficient?
Yeah.
The next question is maybe because we don't have a tool for that, right?
Yeah.
Because maybe it's done in Excel, and that is time consuming. And so you can keep asking these questions.
So actually we go to root of every question, right?
Yes.
And go deeper in each and every question. Yeah.
The idea is that you create this business driver tree once for your business, and then you can pull it out every month. Every month you need to do a variance analysis, and then you can go box by box. Is it this? No. Is it this? No. Is it this? Yes, that's it. So this is now I have my root cause, and that gives people a repeatable way to get there. It takes time to set it up once, but once you have it, it can make a big difference in helping people get there. The other tool that I like to give people is called difference analysis.
Okay.
So, because often the challenge is that we are not sure whether the driver we identified actually impacts the metric that we're seeing. Is there really a correlation, or is it just coincidence that this happens? And the difference analysis helps companies discover that. So how it works, it's basically applying the scientific method to finance, which I always find interesting, where you say, okay, let's separate this into a treatment group and a control group.
Okay.
That sounds fancy. Essentially what it is.
It's interesting, and not heard this one before.
Yes. So let's say you're launching a new website, and you're curious to see how well is this working to help me get more leads or maybe more signups. And so you launch the website in one region, but then you don't launch it in another region that is usually very similar.
Okay.
And it's also called A/B testing.
A/B testing, okay.
But it takes it a step further, where then you also collect data before you do the intervention and then after in both regions. And then you do the difference before versus after in region A, before versus after in region B, where you launch a new website. And then you compare the difference in those differences to get to an indicator. And if you did a good job in making sure that the two regions are fairly similar, other than the new website that you launched, then gives you a way to determine, okay, how much did this website really impact the thing we're trying to track.
Nice. It's a nice take, and I like the example. So Christian, so whatever you said now, I think what I understood is technology plays a key role, right? So what are the technological hurdles actually faced by the finance team to do this deep spend analysis? So what are the challenges they face?
Right. So finance teams need to have access to more than just their accounting system.
Yeah.
And at some companies, if they have using a different system for each that are not connected, that are difficult to use. So for example, if they have one CRM system, then they have another HR system, then they have another accounting system, and they all don't talk to each other, they're all different, then that can make it very challenging. And because then it makes it difficult for finance to get the data.
Yeah.
And that sometimes also leads to issues with not having a single source of truth. So actually, I want to share a story there as well, because this is something that really became an issue for me in the past.
Okay.
So I was working at a company where I was leading the FP&A team, and we were looking at and analyzing marketing expenses. It was a very extensive analysis that the team ran, because what we try to understand is how many people visit the website, how many of them sign up to a free trial of the product, and then how many of those convert to paying visitors. Because we wanted to see how well does the marketing team do in getting people to visit, but then also how well does the product team do in getting people to convert from a free trial to the paid product.
Yeah.
And so my team ran a lot of analysis, collected all of this data, and then finally it was time to present. It was a big meeting with all the heads of department present. Very senior people in the room. I think 15 people in the room, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
We were of course very prepared, right? We double checked all the numbers, and so we started the presentation. And then I got to a slide where I said, well, unfortunately, our conversion rates from website visitors to trials have declined recently. And so we wanted to have a discussion around why that's the case.
Okay.
But then the VP of product raised their hand and said, wait a minute, that's not true.
True, okay.
I looked at those numbers, and I'm seeing that actually the conversion rates improved recently. And so that created a lot of confusion, because they were essentially contradicting what we were seeing, and the rest of the meeting was chaotic. It was just about who was right, who was wrong.
Okay.
It was terrible. And then so after the meeting, of course, the first thing I did was double check, did we make any mistakes? Was there anything we missed? We didn't make any mistakes. We got the data from where we thought we'd get the data. All the numbers were correct based on what I could tell. But then I asked the head of product to share his data with us. And it turned out that he got his data from a different system, and they had a different definition of what a website visitor even means. Because the thing is, a lot of people, when they visit a website, they only stay 2 or 3 seconds. And the question is, do you count that as a website visitor? So how do you define that metric? Because you could argue, if they're only on the website that briefly, then they don't have enough time to evaluate the product, to sign up to the trial, so they shouldn't be counted. Or you have a strict metric where you say, well, marketing paid for those people to come to the website, so we need to count all of them. And because we had a disparity there in how we define it, the whole meeting was chaos, and we had different numbers. So the takeaway here is you need to have a single source of truth. Can be an Excel spreadsheet, or even better, it's a tool that you have, that's connected to the cloud, where everyone goes to the same place, and people know, okay, this is how this metric is defined, and it's not that part of the company gets the data here, the other part of the company gets the data there, and then you have these issues that arise.
Yeah. Now I'm more curious to know what is the result of the meeting, and then whether those guys agreed to actually have one data. But this is actually same across most of the companies, because there are siloed systems, there are disconnected systems, and people are not privy to the information. The finance team is not privy to the information from marketing. Marketing is not privy to the information from product. So this is the biggest trouble what we are also hearing from everywhere we meet.
Right.
Thank you, Christain, to bringing this out. Christain, in one of your answers, you mentioned political issues. So that made me curious. So what is this political issues all about? So how it comes in way of effective spend management, and how can the finance leaders can handle this better? So
so that's fairly common. It's very common at large companies, but it can also happen at smaller companies. And the reason behind it's actually really interesting. It's that there's local optimization and global optimization. So what that means is the salesman, let's take sales as an example. The sales manager has local goals. Their goals might be to sell as many products as possible. But then the company has global goals where they want to have increase their profits, right? And there can be disconnects that happen there, because the sales manager just wants to sell as much as possible. They don't care if the product is very profitable. Maybe they want to use a lot of discounts. They're arguing for using discounts to sell more products, but then that could actually result in lower profits overall. So you have this disconnect. But the challenge is that you can't simply tell a sales manager your goal is to have to increase profits, because there's so much more that goes into profitability than just selling more products. It's all the expenses, a lot of things that a sales manager doesn't have control over, and you don't want to give people goals and incentives that they can't move themselves, right? You have to make them relevant, which is why companies tell salespeople you only worry about selling more, right?
More. True.
But that then creates politics, because then the sales manager will argue, well, I want to do more discounts so I can sell more. The marketing team wants more budget, for example. And that can then result in there being disconnect with the global goals. So how do you resolve that? The interesting thing is that it's actually a difficult problem. It's not, there is, because if you, on the one hand, you have the issue that you don't want to have noisy goals. You don't want to have goals that people can achieve themselves. But on the other hand, you want to make people responsible for the entire company success. So you will never be able to fully resolve it. So teams like finance, like FP&A, have to help with connecting the dots, with influencing people. What you can do is sometimes politics gets worse because there isn't enough transparency. Transparency around how do your actions impact the global goals, the total company goals. So that's number one. And then number two is you need to make sure that your incentives, your goals that you give people are at least connected to global goals. So how large companies do this, and I worked at Unilever, I worked at Procter & Gamble, who have decades and decades of experience of managing this problem. The way they're handling it is they make it mandatory that every local goal that a person has is at least connected to the 5 big global priorities.
True.
So you have to, if you can't make a connection, you can't use that goal.
Yeah, this actually not only for the larger companies, even the smaller companies who I interact to, they don't align their spend management goals to overall financial strategy of their organization. Leave the KPIs, but for example, consider an insurance selling company. So for them, they need more people on the ground. So they can't actually reduce their travel and expense budget because their business is to be on the ground, right? So your overall financial strategy should align with your expense strategy. So this is the biggest disconnect. I think you rightly put that way, and even larger companies face this problem more, but smaller companies, they don't even have that alignment. So that is what I think they should get to, actually.
Great point.
Good. Michael, FP&A also add values to the spend management process by maintaining the budget discipline, which is most tough thing to handle for any finance teams. So can you elaborate how they can achieve this budget discipline, and any tips and tricks from your side?
Yeah. So budget discipline is about making sure that changes to the budget are understood, are reconciled, are communicated ahead of time, ideally. But then also there are some rules that people have to stick to. There might be accounting rules as well. And inexperienced people, inexperienced FP&A professionals sometimes have the challenge that they don't want to call someone out. They don't want to challenge someone because they're concerned that it might hurt their relationship. And it is true that we need to think about how can we protect the relationship, because it's so much about trust, right? If we don't trust each other, then the other department heads won't share data early enough, and then we can't help them, right? We can't help them with analysis. And so, but there are ways how you can challenge people and manage budget discipline while protecting the relationship. And specifically, there are 2 principles I teach. There's act lawyer, like a lawyer, not like a police officer.
Okay.
And there is think process, not people.
Okay.
So let's start with act like a lawyer, not like a police officer. The thing is, acting like a police officer is easy, right? It's just enforcing the rules.
It's just control, yeah.
Just control. When a police officer sees you do something that you're not supposed to do, they tell you not to do it. And if you keep doing the thing, then they take uncomfortable actions against you, right? It's a very black and white approach to finance. And but a lawyer comes from a completely different perspective. The lawyer also wants to make sure that you don't break the law, but the intent is to help you. The intent is to take you by the hand and make sure that we are getting to the goal you want to get to while staying on the right side of the law, and while sticking to the rules that we all need to stick to.
Okay.
And so as a finance professional, if you can act more like a lawyer it can make a big difference. And what that means, essentially, it means you need to understand where the gray areas are. Because not everything in business is black and white. Right?
True.
If there's a small, a few $100 or a few $1,000, if you're a bigger company that's over budget, nobody cares, right? And you need to help put that in context. Or if another scenario where sometimes using gray areas can make a difference is two heads of departments talk to each other and say, hey, I'm going to spend a bit less next month. Oh, I could need the money. Can you give me the money? Maybe, your company might have a policy that shouldn't happen. They shouldn't, just make these deals amongst themselves. But you could say, well, in this case, it's really for the better of the business. And so I'm going to manage it. I'm going to update my forecast. I'm not going to be a stickler and have to make you stick to the rules and use those gray areas. So it's more difficult to act that way. You need to understand what the gray areas are, but usually it really pays off not to act like a policeman when it comes to budgeting. The other example is think process, not people. Now, this is when really something happened that was against the rules. So to share an example of something that actually happened to me in the past, I was managing the budget for, again, a marketing team, and they ran a big TV campaign. And they booked the TV expense in March, but the campaign aired in April. And the accounting rules said that you need to put the expense in the same month that the TV campaign airs, because then you have the benefit and the expense in the same period. And that's the matching principle. It's very important in accounting. And I thought that especially the senior marketing managers knew that, because we talked to them about, we explained that several times before. It was part of the training that we did before. But this one marketing manager ignored the rule and booked it in different periods, and it was a large amount. It was a real issue.
I know.
And so I thought, what should I do? So should I walk over and ask, hey, what happened? Why did you do this? But then I thought, no, that actually is not the best way to approach this. Let's think about the process instead of the people. So thinking about the process, we thought, well, how can we help our marketing business partners make this easier? Because probably they didn't do it on purpose. So then what we added was a check at the end of every month where we had a calendar with all the different campaigns and when they aired. And we asked the marketing manager to tick off each one to make sure that they're booking it in the right period when they're submitting their expenses. And we thought we would get some pushback because it's additional work. People don't like additional work. But they actually thanked us for it. They said, oh yeah, we don't mind spending a few more minutes each month, because then we are sure that we're doing it the right way.
And we also just see the impact of those campaigns in the same month when the expense has been booked. Let's shift the gears a bit, and I want you to put on your corporate trainer hat, because you meet a lot of CFOs and FP&A leaders across industries. What are the new trends you're picking? So what is happening now? What are the new trends they are discussing more? Can you just throw some light on it?
Yeah, there are quite a few. So there is XP&A. For those who haven't heard the term before, it's, instead of saying it's just financial planning and analysis, it's X planning and analysis, basically meaning that we shouldn't just look at the financial data to help leaders make better decisions. We also need to look at what we get from the HR system, from the expense management system, from the CRM, and see how we can connect that to make better predictions. I touched on that earlier. That's number one. The second one is the shift from finance as a back office to a strategic partner of the business.
That's true.
So in the past, it was totally sufficient for finance leaders to produce reports about the business performance, to update forecasts, maybe to also take inputs into account from other functions about updating the forecasts, and to manage the budgets, right? But that was it. But now CFOs look at the finance team, and especially because they're equipped now with much better tools like AI, I'll talk about it in a moment, spend manage tools, other tools that reduce the number crunching and the manual work. Now they actually have the time to do more than the basics. So that means becoming a strategic partner to the business, to helping leaders across the business to reach their goals. And when I teach strategic business partnering, I focus on 4 pillars. There is improving visibility of business performance. So a finance leader should always be on the lookout of additional metrics we aren't yet tracking that maybe can help us spot trends earlier. Then the second pillar is raising accountability. So making sure that we know why performance isn't as expected. And again, that doesn't mean finger pointing, but it means getting to the root causes and figuring out, okay, what's driving things.
True.
Then the third one is influencing and empowering.
Okay.
So this is where we want to, sometimes, there are conflicting goals and we need to influence different departments to maybe focus more on sustainable profitability and on growth. And the fourth bucket of effective business partnering is simplifying and questioning. And that's something that you don't want to underestimate. That's about asking the right questions at the time. So for example, asking challenging questions that help leaders think outside the box, that help leaders look at the issues from a different angle. Because I do think that so much about being successful as a finance leader, especially the more senior you become in the company, it's about asking the right questions at the right time. So that's an important piece of the puzzle as well. So those are the first two trends. Then we have generative AI. Of course, everybody's been talking about that for a few years now.
Yeah.
Those are your chatbots, your Gemini, Copilot, ChatGPT, Claude, all those chatbots that are out there. And they can make your life a lot easier. When I teach, I actually realize that they're often a bit underutilized, that people aren't making enough use of those, even though companies are starting to provide them and making it possible for people to use them safely. And then there's machine learning.
Yeah.
And machine learning has actually been around for much longer than generative AI. It's a much more mature technology. What it means is it can take historical data and then use that to make predictions.
True.
And that's also an emerging trend where more companies are now realizing that they can use that because maybe in the past they didn't have a big data science team, or they thought that machine learning, you need that big data science team, but that has changed, right? And that's changing because a lot of software tools also give that out of the box and then allow you to use machine learning models to improve your forecast accuracy.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's you have rightly pointed out, because machine learning was there for years, right? Even simplifying the manual tasks, machine learning has been there to capture your receipts, right?
Yeah.
So those are the OCRs has been there for a longer time. So those are the basic form of AI. But when this generative AI come, then people started noticing AI. But
yeah, you mentioned OCRs.
Yeah.
It's the process of taking paper invoices and digitalizing them.
Yeah.
And also, when it comes to spend management, machine learning also helps with matching a purchase order to an invoice, with spotting issues where there could be fraud, or could be other issues.
But I have one more leading question to the answer. To your answer? Like you said, the CFOs and the finance leaders are actually moving away from just being a number crunchers to strategic architects. But we have been seeing this in the larger organizations for more than decades now. You see finance leaders are considered most like business strategists. But how do you see in the mid and small? Because you actually interact with entire spectrum of industries, from the largest of the businesses, the medium to the startups and everything. So how do you see the shift happening? Because those small and mid businesses are the larger chunk, right? And where do you see that shift happening in the mindset of the finance leaders in the middle and the small businesses?
Yes, it's a great question, because there are big differences still. So I used to work at a very large company, Unilever, where we had everything outsourced that we could outsource, and so the finance team was really focused on the tasks at hand. But even there, though, we had the ERP system, and we were still using a lot of Excel. So even there was room to improve. But smaller companies historically have struggled with that a lot more, because in the past, getting the tools that allow you to automate this number crunching were very expensive. And so I often talk to finance teams who think that, oh no, we can't afford any of these tools that make our lives easier. But that's just not true anymore. Especially in the last 5-7 years, the price has come down. And there are more options available too, so you can probably find a tool that's less expensive.
Yeah.
And the other issue is that finance teams don't, in smaller and medium-sized companies, they say, oh, we don't have an IT team that could set this up, and I'm already busy. How can I find the time to bring a new tool on board? But also the reality is that a lot of these modern tools now are much easier to implement.
Or mostly DIY. You can actually
DIY,
learn on your own and then implement on your own.
Yes, you don't need a 10-person IT team just to bring a new software on board. But that's also something that changed, and where people are still a bit have to do some catch up, especially at smaller and medium-sized companies where people think it's not possible to get these cutting-edge tools to automate a lot of the work, but it actually is.
Actually, that is a very interesting point you mentioned. Two things which I liked with your answer is, one, due to the advent of technology, the cost of software and these tools are coming down, and people in the small businesses and medium businesses has to make use of it. And second thing, on these tools doesn't need years of learning, because mostly are DIY. I hope most small and large medium-sized businesses actually adapt, and I'm seeing a lot of change happening mostly in US. I think people have adapted, the small and medium businesses have adapted to these tools, and it's actually getting better. So I think I see a sea change with AI coming. The prices of softwares will further come down a bit, and then I think it will actually make a kind of a sea change in way technology being used in financial transformation.
Right.
So, Christain, given those emergent technologies, what we discussed in case of generative AI and the advent of AI which is happening, and the advent of the cloud-based solutions, where do you see, what difference you see the finance team working in future than what they're working now? Look, what is the difference between the finance teams of today and the finance teams of tomorrow? So what they can do, or what do you think they have to do?
Yeah. So today, a lot of finance teams, especially at smaller, medium-sized companies, still spend a lot of time on report creation, on getting to the root causes and doing everything I mentioned, but it just takes a long time. And even closing the books can take a long time, by the way. You know, a lot of companies I talk to say it takes them a week, 2 weeks to close the books, and then the finance team can start digging into the numbers, and then they're working with disparate systems, and then sometimes it takes all the way until the last week of the month where they can finally have the insights. Of course, that often doesn't work, and then so leaders say you need to give us the insights earlier, and then they share something the first week of the month, but it won't be very deep. It won't be very actionable, and then that's a challenge not just for the CEO who wants to get good output of his CFO, of his finance leaders, but also it makes the job less rewarding. Because if you feel like you're not really moving the needle, your analysis, your work doesn't really have an impact, it's not that fun to be a finance leader, right?
That's true.
Because then you're just thinking, you're just going through the motions. But now, as technologies are becoming, as we mentioned, more accessible, easier to implement. This is changing quickly, and also the expectation is changing quickly, by the way, from senior leadership. So finance teams need to make sure not to miss the boat there. And but if you have tools like, so let's take spend management as an example. If you have a unified spend management system where you have your payroll and your procurement and your AP and all your travel expenses under one roof, and everything is easily accessible in a system that's easy to use, then that can make a huge difference. Because then you're not spending a week chasing after travel receipts because people didn't submit them
on time,
and you email back and forth, and you're not chasing after the last issue in the payroll, and everybody's getting stressed if you can run payroll on time, because there's some little things that are manual. If you have a unified spend management system, one, it becomes easier to actually do everything you need to do to close the books, so your accountants will also thank you. But then the analysis part is a lot easier as well, because now you have one place where you can go. And if it's unified, it means that you don't have a different system you have to learn for payroll, a different system you have to learn for travel. It's all under the same roof. And then the job changes, because then it's not about number crunching, copy pasting everything into Excel, massaging the numbers in Excel. You can get the insight from the tool, and then it's about business partnering. Then you have the time to say, okay, I saw that our travel expenses were up. I looked at the tool. I can see it's because different hotels were used in the past. Let's talk about why. Let's talk about, do we really need that, right? And then it's about problem solving and about making concrete recommendations. And then the job changes, and all of a sudden, you are actually feeling like your work has an impact, you're influencing decision making, and I feel like there's nothing more rewarding than you make a recommendation, you see it getting implemented
and see results to your work, right? Exactly. Not just numbers, you see actual results to your work. Yeah,
exactly.
True.
So I do think while people have to upskill, the skills required, even in entry-level positions, are changing. It's not just about how good you are in Excel. It's also about, it's much more about communication, even leadership skills in junior finance roles, because partnering with different teams, that's leadership, right? And so there's some upskilling required. But at the end, I do think that finance roles will just become more interesting. And so, I have a positive.
Yeah, it's no more boring job, right? Because finance professional across organizations were seen always boring people and actually very number crunches. But actually, it's changing. They're becoming more into businesses. We are seeing the impact directly from the finance teams in the way the businesses are being handled. So. And then I think it's a very exciting time to be a finance professional. I'm just saying it. I think I think you may agree to it. I think it's a great time to be a FP&A professional, or for that matter, a finance professional. Thank you, Christain. I think those were wonderful insights. I don't know, probably we spent around an hour, but I didn't think that 1 hour just went like a blink. And it was great talking to you as always. And every conversation of us has been actually wonderful and insightful, and I'm a bit jealous of your students, right? I think they are actually having you more than us. Like we used to get only once for a while, but your students are very lucky, and keep doing what you're doing, and then keep empowering, and then training a lot of professionals, and let's make finance great. Thank you very much for your time, and thanks for being on the show.
Thanks so much. I really enjoyed the conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you everyone, and we will meet in next episode of Expert Talks from CFO Exchange by Zoho. Bye.